got my friend here with the WR and his friends with some DRZs, and we're going to see how the KLX300 compares to the old school of dirt bikes, dual sports, and we're going to compare it to the new 300, the next generation of where I guess dual sports are going. I believe both DRZs have stage 1 mods, so 3x3 mod, jetting, exhaust. The Yamaha stage 1 mods, full exhaust, tuner, and airbox as well. So we're gonna go mess around a bit here. We're gonna hit the twisties, hop back and forth between each bike, and get some impressions on the thing and see how all of these bikes compare. I'm excited to get back on the WR, see how the power band compares to the 300 here, because that's what the 300 power band feels like from what I remember of the WR250R. KLX300, if you guys remember on the dyno, made about 23 horsepower at the wheel. WR makes about 27 uncorked. The DRZs have the potential for over 30 uncorked. A little bit heavier bike though, 5-speed. Gearing plays a big role in putting the power down on these bikes. Alright, here we go. Have some fun here. Take a couple laps. So as I remember, the power on this bike comes on pretty hard up top. Oh yeah. Almost feels two-stroke like. Hey, listen to this thing, guys. You can really hear it rip when you get up top. Need a little bit better tires on the rear, but dang, it gets going hard up top. Look at that thing rip. How's it feel?
Torquey.
Yeah?
That's got more top end.
Yeah.
And this has got more grunt in the mid-range.
Yeah, that's right about where the cams come on.
Yeah.
This one has more top end. It comes on hard, but it pulls all the way to red line.
Yeah, the suspension's a little soft.
Yeah, I haven't touched the clickers, but it's definitely softer than this.
Yeah, that's I haven't touched. I don't even know how to adjust the suspension on it.
Yeah, on mine I made mine.
Well, I adjusted the rebound to max on that.
And on mine I did compression and rebound in the rear and preload, so it's a lot better than that. All right, out on the DRZ now. Feels like a big KLX upon first impression. Suspension is way stiffer. Almost feels like my KX, but a little bit softer. But rebound is actually nice and controlled. Let's give this thing a rip, see how she pulls. Wow. You got the torque, it goes up top. Now this thing's supposed to be like 20 pounds heavier than the KLX. I don't know if I feel it. These things are real torquey, that's for sure. Now once you you get going up top, talking about the power band, it feels like the WR has a stronger power band up top than the DRZ, but I'm sure the DRZ makes more power than the WR by a couple of horsepower. The thing I'm impressed about is off-road here with the 5-speed. The bike has enough torque to carry the gearing, the weight. It feels stiff enough and suspended enough where you don't really notice it. Biggest difference in power I notice is, yeah, it has good torque, but so does the KLX. The WR is lacking in torque a bit, but on the DRZ it seems to be missing a little bit of top end charge compared to the WR and the KLX. But the power band is nice, smooth, and linear. You make power all around. You don't need to worry about revving it out. If you do rev it out, it has power up top there.
I love this thing.
This thing has so much torque.
Over that.
You would?
Oh fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually want to list this and buy one of those.
Oh,
riding this is pretty fucking nice too. I like it.
Yeah.
Feels like it soaks up stuff nice. It's not too choppy.
Right. It doesn't feel like you're doing a bunch of work to...
Yeah, without thinking you're just banging around.
What I noticed, this feels like it has some good suspension, like stiff and whatnot. And that, like, it carries the weight kind of... It carries the weight well. It's light. I don't really notice the weight too much on this, but sitting here like this, yeah, you feel it up the top. Alright, they said the suspension is better on this bike than the other DRZ I was riding. Whoa, this thing's geared a little bit better. It might be jetted better too. Oh yeah, suspension on this thing feels really good. Wow, I am surprised actually. This thing hauls like a horse. Wow. Oh, there's a little bit of the weight turning the thing. Sick little jump there. Wow. There's the power up top. Jeez. The way it makes power reminds me a lot of my KLX. It just seems to pull a bit better in the higher RPMs. It feels pretty good. Wow. Alright, back on the KLX. Feels a bit shorter than the DRZ going back and forth. That's one thing you notice. So now coming back on the KLX, it hits that power band up top like the WR. And like I said, I know what the graph looks like on the KLX here. I just know it drops off a little bit up top, but in terms of power band, it feels pretty similar to the WR. Alright everybody, now we go out and head to the twisties, see how these bikes do on the road. We're gonna have to do a big group trip to get on the trails, see how these bikes do out there, but now we go ahead and take to the streets to see how much of a difference there is between these bikes. We'll hop on the WR again, get some road action, hop on the DRZ, see how that thing does. These guys are talking about how they like the KLX, so it'd be great for the trails, how nimble it is. They're talking about that compared to the DRZ, which I agree with. Like I said, on an off-road ride, you can throw it around different lines. It doesn't feel like it's a freight train with one way through. Alright guys, first task at hand, we gotta find a way to get a 4-way drag race. Not sure if the WR got a good run. KLX actually kept up pretty well with the WR. Must be that power band. The WR definitely started pulling away though. We'll have to see how that goes when the KLX here is uncorked fully. The WR missed a gear, but even before and after, he was just barely pulling gears 1 and 2. The KLX was staying pretty even with the WR. So on the trails, what that's going to translate to is really not much of a difference in speed on the trails. And like I've said before, between these bikes, it's really just going to come down to the rider if you're trying to see who's the fastest. There you go. So again, the KLX kept up pretty well.
You want to switch?
Huh?
You want to switch?
Sure, yeah.
So you can feel it without wheel spin?
Right. Yeah, this kept up pretty well through gears like maybe 1 and 2 and 3 you started pulling. So
that's just that top end.
Yeah, top end and gearing, and yeah, but I'm excited to see how this will do when it's like, you know, modded. Alright, so here we are in the WR. We're gonna hit the twisties now, give you guys my thoughts now that this thing is geared better than the last ride, I should say. And then we'll hop on the DRZ and we'll see how that compares to the KLX and the WR here. So I remember saying this in my last ride, the WR feels a little bit like a sporty riding position. Your knees are a little bit lower, your feet are set back a bit, which makes you lean forward a little bit more than the KLX. Two-stroke-like in its power delivery. You keep this thing in its power band up top and it'll punch out of corners, but if you stay gear too low, you kind of need to wait for the power to come on. Full throttle, power, 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 and bam! In terms of weight, the WR is a bit taller than the KLX, so it feels like it has weight up top, but that's really just due to the fact that it's taller. It doesn't feel like it's gonna fall over when you're in the corners, slow speed stuff. Just for shorter riders, you may notice that, hey, this thing's kind of tall. Now, I'm surprised that the KLX hung with the WR as well as it did. Like I said, gears 1, 2, and 3, it held with it pretty well. 3, the WR started pulling away though. I can say on the trails, you're definitely going to be finding yourself riding this like a two-stroke. If you guys saw a few videos back, I had the KX out with my friend's YZ125, and down low the YZ, you were working the clutch, full throttle, trying to get that thing to go to get to the power band. On the trails, this is going to obviously have more torque than that. I remember talking about this before with the WR, their head design is pretty good, coming from the factory, which gives it that power up top. Suspension here in the twisties feels similar to the KLX300 SM. Has good compression, rebound, is nice and controlled. So last thing on power here, like I said, you're missing a little bit of that torque in comparison to the KLX300, but with the WR here, more than makes up for it in its top end. One last thing here before we switch off and get on the DRZ. This WR here, it's going to age pretty well. Suspension, it feels great. It has fuel injection. It makes the power that my KLX351 made with just the big bore. It has good ergonomics. Your knees are tucked in tight to the bike, and if you gear this thing down a bit, it works pretty well. How was that thing?
You like it?
Yeah.
This is so like you were saying, I feel like where my bike starts to rev, this stops revving.
Yeah.
So I had to get used to how to get the power out of it, because it has the power, but I'm so used to like finding my power and
Like revving it up high.
yeah. So I had to short shift. And once I was like, oh, okay, if I just short shift it, we're gonna get some power out of it. So it's got a lot of torque.
Yeah.
I would say in the bottom mid,
like 4 to 7.
yeah.
Woo! This thing's got some power. Nice and linear. Doesn't feel like there's a spot. Jeez, that cat has hopped that fence. Doesn't feel here like there's any point in the power band where it's just gonna buck you off the bike. Oh yeah, this thing gets moving all right. Just about perfect. Soaked up the bumps well, but has enough compression for when you get into the rough stuff. Rebound feels pretty smooth as well. And the carburetor, don't really notice it. Whoa, that brake is high. Wow, this thing's got some go to it. So with the DRZ and slower speed stuff, I did notice that it does carry its weight up higher. Not necessarily because the bike is bigger and taller, but just because it actually does carry its weight up like that. Man, oh man, does it punch out of corners. The other thing I was saying earlier is that you're kind of sitting on top of the bike more in terms of like a dirt bike, like my KX. So it's kind of hard to get off the bike and lean off of it. I shouldn't say hard, it's just different. A little bit different than the KLX. Your knees are below the tank still, so you still have something to grip with your knees to hang on the bike. Pretty much anywhere in the power band you can just get on and it'll roll on nice and smooth. Feels similar to my 351. I like that. The 351 just feels like it's in a bit smaller of a package, a bit more nimble. Going through these twisties, rebound is nice and controlled. Feels like the KLX300 Supermoto. So out of all the bikes, the DRZ is the oldest platform in terms of its motor. And you do notice that a little bit, like I said, 5-speed. It is a wide ratio 5-speed, so you can cruise pretty well at 70 miles an hour. But the motor does get a little bit of vibey up there. Not as smooth as the newer bikes, but when you have an absolute tank that makes a whole bunch of power, you might experience that a little bit. That thing gets going to 80 a lot quicker than the KLX. I can tell you going into this review, I expected the DRZ to feel a lot heavier. I expected you to be sitting lower in the bike, kind of feeling like you're pushing around a hog, like people say, but the way it's suspended, it handles the weight a lot better than I thought. This bike seems to have its jetting done correctly, so in terms of fuel injection versus carburation, you really don't notice a difference too much. The seating position of the DRZ feels more dirt bike-esque. Feels like a taller bike against suspension here. Overall pretty impressive package. Much better than I was expecting. I was expecting that you'd be able to tell the difference between fuel injection and carburation. I expected the bike to be pretty heavy, softer suspension. but I guess it kind of proved me wrong a little bit. Back home, everyone. Like I said, I was actually pretty surprised with the DRZ, and I was also surprised at how well the KLX kept up with the WR, being that the KLX is all stock. So with that being said, I think we're gonna have to get all those bikes on the trails to see how they do out there, and of course, I'm excited to see how the 300 does once it's fully uncorked and we get all the performance mods done. But in these times, we are waiting for parts, and it's kind of annoying, but hopefully they'll get here soon. But if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up, share it to your friends, those who may enjoy it or find it useful. And of course, if you're not subscribed, go down there, hit that subscribe button, get the bell on, keep up with all the action. If you're into motorsports, you're in the right place. But with all that being said, join the club, and I'll see you in the next one.